Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This is going to be the 10-game NBA slate for today on Draftkings, and as you can see, we have a little bit of a different format here, but I think this is what we're going to do from here on out. I think it's just going to be easier for me to have a portion of my spreadsheet pulled up for you guys just right on tap, because this is what I like to use for my videos, so just be able to read off my spreadsheet instead of having to make notes, and it kind of doubles the work time. I think this might be a little bit more simple, and there's probably a little bit more visually appealing being able to actually see this instead of just listening to it as well. It's not my whole entire spreadsheet, but it's just a portion of it, so this is not the entire list of players on DraftKings. I kind of took some guys out that I have some early interest on, and then we're going to talk about them, in this video, and also have my socials, and it's mirrored, so it's right over here. It's my Twitter account at ChrisPennell16, my Instagram at CPenn16, and then also have Patreon content as well, including the spreadsheet that I put every single night. It's got projections on here, pretty much everything you're going to see in a little bit. Also have my defense first position chart, which I may show a little bit in my cheat sheet, core plays, in my Discord chat as well. And as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. And like I said, follow my socials if you want. Check out Patreon. The link's available in the description below so you can get access to my spreadsheet that I update all the way up until lock. Update my projections all the way up until lock because you guys know how hectic news can get. Also my Discord chat while I relay information that I want to give out. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. I hope you guys like this new format. And if you don't, I apologize, but this is a little bit easier for me. So here we go. So up top, so we have a pretty exciting game here in Houston versus Minnesota. So some of the totals aren't out yet, but we do have some early totals, and this Houston game happens to already be out, and we have a 234 total here, which is more than likely going to be the highest on the entire slate. The Rockets have a 119.5 point not over under 119.5 point total with only a 5-point spread, so it's actually a little bit closer than you'd think. And it's obviously probably because Karl-Anthony Towns is back for the, I almost said the Twins, for the T-Wolves here, so it should help keep the game a little bit close. But James Harden, he's actually been struggling recently, so I'm not going to be able to pull up the game logs or anything, but he has been struggling. Russell Westbrook has, he's pretty much taken a back seat to Russell Westbrook. Westbrook has been running the show, but I do have interest in this game, and if you have enough salary to spend all the way up for James Harden, I totally get it. I mean, the guy's been having a fantastic season for the most part. I know some nights he has these awful shooting outings, but it's going to be a pretty fast-paced, up-and-down game with not a lot of defense going on. These are some of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. As you can see, both teams are third in pace of play, so it's going to be a track meet here, and if you just look at our defense versus position chart that I'll pull up right now, Houston is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is the 6th worst defensive team so far in the NBA this season, and we also have Minnesota, which is bottom 10 as well. They do rank 26th versus shooting guards, so this is a pretty good spot for James Harden. Now, do I like the recent form he's been in? Not at all, but if you just look at the numbers this season, it's hard to deny how great he's been. He's averaging 1.63 DraftKings points per minute, which, as you can see, leads the entire slate, and he also has a 37.6% usage rate. So not a lot of bad things I can say about James Harden besides his price and recent form, but this is an amazing spot here versus Minnesota. This is going to be the top game of the slate. So you can certainly look James Harden's way. Oop, I can see my camera got a little blurry there. All right, seems to fix itself though. All right, anyway, so right below him we have Russell Westbrook, and he's actually the second most expensive guy on the slate. We're usually used to him being in this 8K to 9K range. Well, they finally priced him up to 10,400, and it's deserved because the guy's been absolutely balling out. And like I said, this game's going to be a track meet, but he's had multiple 60-point games in at least the last 5 games. I don't think he's had a game worse than 50 fantasy points. He has been absolutely balling out, and he's certainly the better option than James Harden is, at least recently, and I don't see why that would change. Just versus Minnesota here is an amazing spot. Like I said, it's going to be a track meet. Highest over-under on the slate, 119.5 point team total. Comes in a little bit cheaper than James Harden. He's been playing better. Now, his numbers won't suggest that he's a better play, but just from recent form, I mean, he's been playing better, and he's got a 33% usage rate on the season. He's at 1.37 points per minute. Not a lot of bad things I can say about Russell Westbrook. I do think he's a very solid play. Then we'll drop down to Kawhi Leonard. So I like the top 5 or top 6 most expensive players on the slate. So it's going to be a little bit tricky which ones you want to spend up on. So it's really going to come down to roster construction and what kind of value plays open up throughout the day. But they're all pretty much in really good spots, and I do want to talk about them. But Kawhi Leonard, so he's going to benefit because Paul George is out. Patrick Beverley, I believe, is listed as doubtful. So it's going to be the Kawhi Leonard show here. I know Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell exist, but when Kawhi Leonard's on the court and there's no Paul George, he runs the show here. If you look at his DraftKings points per minute, it's at 1.5. With Paul George off the court, it's about 1.6, and his usage rate goes up all the way about 36%. So a lot to like about Kawhi Leonard here. He's also only 10,300. Now, as for the matchup, going up against a Miami team that's actually pretty solid defensively, but Jimmy Butler is questionable, and if he happens to miss, obviously Jimmy Butler would be the main guy guarding Kawhi Leonard. He's a very solid defender. If he happens to be out, it's going to be pretty easy sledding here for Kawhi Leonard. So you got to have some interest. I mean, I'm not really a big play Kawhi Leonard guy, but he's fine. I will say that I think there's better options on this slate, but with Paul George being out, you had to bring him up. Karl-Anthony Towns, I love this game for fantasy purposes, and if you want to make Karl-Anthony Towns your top spender of the night, I totally get it, and I really like playing Karl-Anthony Towns. I've been playing him a ton this season when he's actually playing. I know he missed a ton of time recently. He's finally come back, but his minutes are going to be fine. I have him projected for 34 as of right now, and pretty good spot versus Houston. Now, I will say they're a very bad defensive team if you look at their defense versus position chart, but the one spot they actually guard well is center. So if I actually scroll this over a little bit, so as you can see, Houston, they're 22nd versus point guards, 28th versus shooting guards, 28th versus small forwards, 27th versus power forwards, 7th versus centers. But Karl-Anthony Towns, you really can't guard the guy. I think he'll be fine versus Clint Capella. Karl-Anthony Towns can body him up. So I really don't have too much concerns about them being pretty solid versus centers just because it's Cat. He's pretty much unguardable. And if you look at his numbers this season, or if you really just look at the, like I said, it's really going to be a nice pace-up spot. Both teams are top 3 in pace-up play. They're actually tied. But if you look at his numbers this season, he has been excellent. He's at 1.52 points per minute. He's got a near 30% usage rate. I believe at 27 point, or I'm sorry, that's PER. At 29% usage rate. So again, Karl-Anthony Towns staying in this game, I think he's a very solid option, and he's also the least expensive of the big 3 in that game. So you got James Harden at 11,100, Russell Westbrook at 10.4, then you got Karl-Anthony Towns at 10.2. So he might grade out as the best point per dollar option play. I've not ran my projections yet, just because not all the Vegas totals are out yet, and I usually like to do that like in the morning instead of the night before. But Karl-Anthony Towns, being the cheapest of this bunch, might be the best option. Not totally sure yet, but definitely a very solid option versus Houston. Then we got Nikola Jokic here. He's going to be going up against the New Orleans Pelicans with Zion. Zion. I know I said Zion in the last game. I know his name's Zion. It's just really hard to get used to not saying Zion, because that's pretty much how everyone else pronounces their name like that. But I'm not even sure why I just brought up Zion, but that was really fun to watch him. He absolutely balled out in the second half of that game. He had 4 threes. Pretty darn sweet. But not really important to Jokic. So Jokic is going to be going up against New Orleans. It's a really nice pace-up spot for the Nuggets. We know the Nuggets love to play slow. We have a 231 total here. Nuggets have 113.75 implied team total, 3.5 point spread. So should be pretty good from a fantasy perspective. And like I said, this is a big pace-up spot. The Nuggets are 28th in pace-up play. They love to play slow, one of the slowest teams in the NBA. But going up against the Pelicans, who are ranked 2nd in pace-up play, so they're getting a nice pace-up spot here. And we all know they're one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. Now, Derek Favors, he's actually pretty solid defensively, but Nikola Jokic, I wouldn't say he's matchup proof because he's had dud games, but he can do a little bit of everything. Always a triple-double threat every single night. He's at 1.39 points per minute on the season. I believe a 25% usage rate if I remember at the top of my head. 26.4% usage rate. So Nikola Jokic, he's fine. Always like I always say, he's more of a GPP option. I really never play him in cash games just because I'd much rather play Drummond for 200 less, and I'd much rather play Karl-Anthony Towns for 500 more. So I usually don't land on Nikola Jokic unless it's like a small slate and he's the clear spend up. I wouldn't say that's the case on this slate. So GPP only for me, but Nikola Jokic is a fine option versus New Orleans. A lot of points should be scored in that game, and you're also missing Jamal Murray, Paul Millsap, Michael Porter might be out as well. Gary Harris is questionable. So, I mean, it's pretty much going to be Jokic and some YMCA bums on that team. So you'd have to have some interest with that high of a total. But Andre Drummond, he's looking like one of the better plays of the night. Now, I know you can have some trouble trusting Drummond recently. I just have a sour taste in my mouth from those couple games he had, I believe, versus Chicago, where he not fouled out, he got ejected. In the one game, he didn't even play in the fourth quarter. But I liked him in that game. I didn't end up playing him, but I did recommend him, so I still felt the sour taste in my mouth of actually recommending him because he got abused by Jahlil Okafor. But I know he had a couple solid games after that. But Drummond versus Memphis at 9,500. got to have interest here. There's not a total out yet, but I have to assume this one's probably going to be one of the higher totals on the slate just because Memphis is awful defensively and Detroit's not that great either. And it's also a really big pace-up spot here for I almost said the Thunder, for the Pistons, as they are 19th in pace of play and Memphis is 8th in pace of play. So it's always like getting guys in pace-up spots. And Drummond, he's always a 20-20 threat every single night, one of the league leaders in rebounds. He's at 1.4 points per minute on the season, over a 20% usage rate. Got to have some interest here versus Memphis. If we look at our defense versus position chart, Memphis is the 4th worst defensive team, and they rank 23rd versus center. So really like the spot for Andre Drummond. He's only 9,500. I think he's one of the better spend-ups on the entire slate, and he also doesn't break the bank, and that's what I like out of my spend-ups, when they don't break the bank at like 12K. So Andre Drummond, very solid play on this slate. Sabonis, he comes in at 8,600. He had a really good game recently. I know he had a couple dud games, but that was due to a blowout, and he also had early foul trouble in the other game. But I believe he dropped 49 points in the last game. And Malcolm Brogdon, the main thing here is Malcolm Brogdon will be out for this game, and it's a really good spot versus Phoenix, if I remember. Yeah, no, not versus Phoenix, versus Golden State. Both pretty awful defenses. Now, Golden State's actually not that bad versus big men. They struggle more versus guards, but they're still not a very good defensive team. They're bottom 10 in total. And there is no total out for this game. But I do like the spot here for the Pacers, especially Sabonis. When Brogdon's off the court, he's at 1.28 points per minute with a 24.6% usage rate. And, I mean, the Warriors don't play as fast as you'd think. They're actually 14th in pace of play, so it's not like it's going to be an absolute track meet. But a little bit of a pace-up spot here in Sabonis. He's one of those safe plays every single night. He's pretty much a safe bet for about 40 fantasy points, if not more, as long as he gets the minutes and he doesn't get into foul trouble. So Sabonis, very safe, solid cash game play. I'd never talk you off Sabonis. He's just one of those safe plays every single night. DeMar DeRozan, he actually came back down to earth a little bit in the last game, but before that, he was on just an absolute tear, scoring 40 and 50 fantasy points every single night. So they dropped his price a little bit after a little bit of a dud game to 7,900, and it's a really good spot here versus Phoenix. We got a 229 total with a 116.5 point implied team total for the Spurs and only a 4-point spread. So I think we can go back to DeMar DeRozan well. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to grade out as a great point per dollar option on this slate just because of the 10-game slates. I'm not sure if he's absolutely necessary, but he's in a pretty good spot here, and a little bit of a, I shouldn't say it's too much of a pace-up spot. Spurs are 12th in pace of play, while the Phoenix is 10th. So it's a little bit of a pace-up spot, but both teams are top 12 in pace of play, and both teams are not that great defensively. So should be a pretty good game for fantasy purposes. The Vegas total will suggest that. And DeRozan, he's having a solid season. He's at 1.13 points per minute, over a 20% usage rate, 26.6% usage rate. He's fine. He's not going to grade out as like an elite point per dollar option, but he's just one of those safe plays every single night. He's been doing a little bit of everything in the stat sheet recently. I know he had multiple games with 9 boards, like 8 or 9 assists, and over 20 points. Kind of what he's been doing recently, and I could see that continuing here versus Phoenix. And then we have D'Angelo Russell going up against Indiana. Now, if I wouldn't usually recommend this because I don't like picking on Indiana, but, or I should say the Pacers. I don't know why I'm saying Indiana, but Malcolm Brogdon's going to be out, and he's one of their best defenders, and that's probably who would be guarding D'Angelo Russell. So that's going to be a downgrade to the defense. I did the same thing with Trae Young, I believe, earlier in this, not like way early in the season, but I want to say in the last month, and it ended up working out because Trae Young had a pretty solid game with Malcolm Brogdon being out, because obviously they're going to take a hit defensively. He's going to be guarded by guys like Aaron Holiday now. So D'Angelo Russell, he gets an upgrade on just offensively with Malcolm Brogdon being out. Not one of my favorite plays on the slate, but he's got over a 30% usage rate. He's pretty much the offense on that team. So he's fine. I'm not going to go too in-depth about D'Angelo Russell, but I just wanted to let you guys know he will get an upgrade with Malcolm Brogdon being out. So SGA. So Oklahoma City gets the wonderful matchup versus Atlanta. We always like to attack Atlanta every single night. There's no total on here yet, but I would assume that the Thunder would have a pretty high implied team total just because Atlanta is the worst defensive team in the NBA. If we go over to the defense versus position chart, as you can see, they are all the way up top, so they are the worst defensive team in the league, and they rank 26th versus shooting guards, and that's what SGA is, and he's been playing very well recently. He's had a couple of 40-point games, and he's been getting a lot of rebounds as well. He's a triple-double threat. There's a little bit of everything. He's going to shoot the ball quite a bit, and on the season, I believe he's right about point per minute, maybe a little bit less if I remember correctly. I also should mention this is a nice pace-up spot here for the Thunder. They are 19th in pace of play, while Atlanta is 5th in pace of play. And SGA on the season, he's getting over 35 minutes per game and 0.98 points per minute with over a 20% usage rate. So I love the matchup for SGA. He's been playing pretty well. I think he's a fine, solid option on this slate. Clint Capella, this is pretty much just getting exposure to this game. Now, Minnesota, they are a pretty bad defensive team. They're actually like mid-pack versus centers. You know, Karl-Anthony Towns, he's a big body, not the best defender in the world. But Clint Capella, just getting exposure to this game, 7,600 seems a little bit too cheap for a guy that's got 60-point upside. I mean, we've seen it multiple times this season. Do I expect that on a given night? No, but I think he's a pretty safe bet for over 35 fantasy points at 7,600. Not too bad. He's over a point per minute guy. Just getting exposure to this game. If I pull it up, I believe Minnesota is ranked, 16th versus centers. So that's barely a plus matchup, but again, just getting exposure to this game. It's going to be a track meet. Both teams are top 3 in pace of play, 234 over/under. The Rockets probably going to have the highest implied team total on the slate. Makes a lot of sense just to want to get exposure to this game. He's at 1.16 points per minute on the season with only a 15% usage rate, but he's a center, so I really not expect too much, especially with guys like Russell Westbrook and James Harden on the court. Obviously, they're going to soak up most of the usage. But Clint Capella, he's got 20-20 upside, so don't mind Clint Capella. Derrick Rose, he has been on an absolute tear recently, and he gets a really nice matchup here versus Memphis. Like I said, I have interest in Drummond. Well, D Rose, he's a little bit overpriced. Andre Drummond's a little bit underpriced, but D Rose is a little bit overpriced. But I do like him for GPPs. I mean, he's very good on a point per minute basis. He's not going to play like 35 minutes a night, but I do have him projected for 30, and he is at 1.21 points per minute. And, I mean, really, he's been kind of over 1.3 points per minute lately, and he's over a 31% usage rate. So when he comes off the bench, he is the guy. He's also been starting recently a little bit. But the guy's been playing absolutely great. He scored at least 20 points consecutively in, for as long as I can remember, I believe since like maybe January 5th, if I remember correctly. But really good spot versus Memphis. They are one of the worst defensive teams when it comes to guards. They rank 19th versus point guards, 29th versus shooting guards, so they really do struggle with the guard position. And D Rose, he's just been on fire. I will say 7,600 will make him not great out as a pretty good point per dollar option play on this slate. So you're pretty much just taking a chance on him in GPPs. Would not play him in cash games, but matchups there. It's going to be a pace-up spot for the Pistons. I don't mind Derrick Rose. LaMarcus Aldridge, he comes in at 7,500, and he balled out in the last game. I believe he had over 50 fantasy points, and he gets a really good spot versus Phoenix. It's a nice pace-up spot for the. I shouldn't say it's a nice pace-up spot for the Spurs. I keep getting in my head that they play slow, they play fast now. But Phoenix, they are 10th in pace of play. Spurs are 12th in pace of play. We got a 229 total here. Should be pretty good for fantasy purposes. And Phoenix does struggle with big men. They're not a very good defensive team, but versus centers, they rank 20th. So they're bottom 10 in the league versus centers. And on the season, LaMarcus Aldridge, I believe, is at 1.12 points per minute. Going to get over, he's going to touch about 35 minutes in this game. 23% usage rate. I think Aldridge is a very solid play on this slate. So Kemba Walker, I hate Kemba Walker. I can literally never get this guy right. I know I tweeted like a week ago, does anyone get Kemba Walker right? Everyone's commenting, absolutely not. So I'm not alone there. I guess everyone feels the pain of Kemba Walker on a nightly basis. But every time I play the guy, he just sucks. I don't understand it. I don't know. Then when I don't play him and he's like 5% owned, he'll get like 60 fantasy points. I don't know. That's just how it goes sometimes. But I'm only bringing him up because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are questionable to play. Jason Tatum had a very good game in the last game, ended up leaving the game a little bit early. I don't know if that was a little bit precautious just because they were killing. I forget who were they playing. I can't remember who they were playing. It was Memphis, right? Yeah, it was a really good matchup. Yeah, versus Memphis. They were absolutely killing them by like 40. Really no reason to push him to come back in. But he's questionable, as is Jaylen Brown. And if you remove those two guys off the court, Kemba Walker, he has a 30.1% usage rate and 1.19 points per minute. So in theory, he'd be a pretty good play. Now, it's a pretty gross matchup versus Orlando. They play pretty slow, and they're actually okay defensively. If you bring up the pace portion of this, they are. So the Celtics, they're 17th in the pace of play, and then the Magic are 29. So it's going to be actually a pretty slow game. But he does see a pretty big boost with those guys off the court, so I thought I'd mention him. Now, Chris Paul, he gets a really good matchup versus Atlanta. Like I said, one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. We don't have a total out yet, but I assume it's going to be pretty high. And he's actually been playing pretty well. He's got 40-point upside. I think he's a pretty safe bet for over 30 fantasy points. Now, at 7,400, you're hoping for more than 30 fantasy points. But He's been over a point per minute guy. He's at 1.13 points per minute, over a 20% usage rate. I'd probably prefer SGA, but he's also a little bit more expensive, so I wouldn't mind dropping down to Chris Paul. But again, it's just getting exposure to the Thunder just because they have that dream matchup versus Atlanta. Andrew Wiggins, just staying in this really nice Minnesota versus Houston game. I'm not really one to play Andrew Wiggins, but 7K is actually an okay price tag. I will say he busts a lot. He's not really a safe play, so he's more of a GPP kind of guy, but he does have upside. And like I said, 234 total. Game's going to be a track meet on the season. I believe he's at least close to a point per minute, if I remember. He's at 1.07 points per minute. It doesn't feel like it, because whenever I play the guy, he gets like 20 points. But he got 28.4% usage rate. I don't hate the idea. If you're just stacking up this game using Andrew Wiggins at 7K, it's not the worst play in the world. Gallinari, again, just getting exposure to the Thunder versus Atlanta. And I like Gallinari because when I played him once, he absolutely balled out for me. I don't really play Gallinari, but the one time I did play him, he was low owned and he hit 7 3-pointers. So I got a nice little soft spot for Gallinari now. I mean, he's been playing forever. I've always liked him a little bit, but I like him now. But it's a good spot versus Atlanta. It's a nice pace-up spot. Suits a guy like him well. It's going to put up a lot of threes. Not afraid to shoot the ball. Going to do a little bit of everything. On the season, I believe he's got a 24% usage rate, which is actually pretty solid for a guy that's 6,800. If I could just pull it up. Yeah, 24.3% usage rate and 1.05 points per minute. And Atlanta, I mean, they suck versus power forwards, versus small forwards, whatever you want to call them. They rank 30th versus small forwards, 29th versus power forwards. Excellent spot here for Gallinari. So you can certainly look his way if you just want exposure to the Thunder. He's also the cheapest of the Chris Paul SGA bunch. So certainly look his way. Gordon Hayward, again, he'd get a boost if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are out. Now, they did price him up. He was in that 5K range. So, unfortunately, he's all the way up to 6,800, and the matchup does kind of suck versus Orlando. But with those guys off the court, his numbers are pretty darn good. He's at a 26.7% usage rate and 1.3 points per minute. 1.3. So, I'd prefer him over Kemba Walker just because his numbers are a little bit more stronger. But I mean, they're both fine, but I do like the price on Gordon Hayward, so you can certainly look his way. Dennis Schroeder, 6,500. He balled out in the last game. And he actually, I believe, had a really good game, at least in the one prior or the one before that. But he's the guy that comes off the bench, and he's running the show when he's off the bench for the most part. I believe he's got a 30% usage rate. Or not 30, 27.1% usage rate, 0.98 points per minute. Awesome spot versus Atlanta, and also I believe that's his old team, so a little bit of a revenge game there. So Dennis Schroeder, obviously it's a good spot versus Atlanta, pace-up spot. I assume the Thunder are going to have a pretty high implied team total. You could certainly look his way. Steven Adams, so he's listed as questionable. If he's good to go, again, just getting exposure versus Atlanta. I'm not going to just keep showing you guys the position chart. Obviously, you guys know it's a good matchup. It's a nice pace-up spot. Adams is over a point per minute guy. But if he misses this game, we'll talk about Nerlens Noel. I do have him listed on here just in case he happens to miss this game. I'm kind of hoping he does because Noel would be a pretty strong play, 5,100. But just know if Adams is in, the whole Thunder lineup they're viable just because it's Atlanta. But Marcus Smart, again, another guy that would benefit from injuries with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown off the court. He's got 23% usage rate, 1 point per minute. Is he going to shoot 22 threes again like the one game? No. I mean, if I play him, I hope he does, but he's not going to. But it is a good spot. I mean, it would be a good spot with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum being out. The matchup, not very good. It's going to be a slow-paced game, but again, these are some pretty important guys that are potentially off the court for the Celtics, so we'd have to have interest in the secondary options. Let's see, Murray. So he's kind of he's a wild card kind of guy. He's capable of these big games, but the minutes are sporadic. He's never really going to get over 30 minutes. I mean, you have to be very, very lucky for him to touch 30 minutes. I only have him projected for 26 right now. But it's a good spot versus Phoenix. They do rank bottom 10 versus guards. This should be a pretty solid game for fantasy. Like I said, 229 over-under. Spurs have 116.5 point implied team total. And he's actually pretty good on a point per minute basis for someone that's only 5,100. And he's at 1.11 points per minute, 20% usage rate. Not too bad. So Murray is on my radar. Just if you want exposure to the Spurs, I totally get it. Nerlens Noel. He would become one of the best plays on the slate if Steven Adams happens to be out. Because there's not a lot of cheap value plays. Like on the slate last night, Gary Trent ended up being a pretty good play at 400 just because some guys were ruled out, like CJ McCollum. And then Trevor Ariza was 3,500, and that was a pretty easy plug-and-play, and he ended up balling out as well. on this slate. None right now, but you guys always know that value opens up throughout the day, more than likely. But Noel would become a very good play with Adams off the court. He's always been a good point per minute guy, but with Adams off the court, he's at 1.13 points per minute. Awesome spot versus Atlanta. You'd have to have interest in Noel. Monty Morris, he comes in at 5K, a little bit more expensive than I'd like to actually pay for. Lost my spot for Monty Morris. But so many guys are questionable or out for the Nuggets. You got Jamal Murray out, Paul Millsap out. I believe Mason Plumlee's out. Not like that really affects him too much. But Michael Porter's questionable. Gary Harris is questionable. So there's just minutes opened up. I got him projected for 30 right now. Now he's only at 0.81 points per minute with all those guys off the court, but that's not too bad, and it is a pretty good spot here versus New Orleans. They rank 30th versus point guards. If I can pull that up on the defense first position chart. As you can see, bright green 30 here for New Orleans. They rank 30th, dead last versus point guards. And it's also a nice pace-up spot. Like I said, New Orleans is second in pace of play. So I do like the pace-up spot here for Morris. I think he's fine at 5K. Again, not a lot of value options on the slate, so we can't get too picky. Jarrett Culver, I debated on putting him in here, but there's not a lot of value options. So when there's not a lot of value options, what I tend to do is I look for the best game on the slate, which is this Houston-Minnesota game, and then I try to take some like cheap players on that slate, or on that slate in that game. So like you can even throw in guys like PJ Tucker, like I said, Jarrett Culver, those kind of guys, you know, just like kind of the boring, cheaper guys that kind of stand on the court and just trip and fall their way to 20 points. That's more PJ Tucker. Jarrett Culver is a little bit more involved. But Culver, he's fine. 4,700. This game's going to be a track meet. I want exposure to this game. On the season, he's at 0.82 points per minute, 20% usage rate. Honestly, not too bad for someone that's 4,700. Elite in game environment. He should probably grade out as one of the better point per dollar options as of right now. Dwayne Dedmon, he comes in at 4,600. He had a very good game in the last time out versus Chicago, if I remember. No, he's going up against Chicago in the last time out. I forget who they played, but he had a pretty good game. Ended up seeing close to 30 minutes. And if Marvin Bagley is out again, we'd have to have interest in Dedmon here. I have him projected for 26 minutes as of right now. And it's an elite spot here versus Chicago. I'll show you guys on the position chart how bad Chicago is versus big men. They rank 30th versus centers and 30th versus power forwards. They're one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA. Certainly a good spot here for the Kings down low, and specifically Dwayne Dedmon. And he's actually pretty solid on a point per minute basis. He's at 0.85 points per minute on the season. Obviously, you'd have to boost that up a little bit with Marvin Bagley being out. So Dwayne Dedmon actually going to grade out as one of the better point per dollar options on this slate as of right now. And then Aaron Holiday, he would get a boost with Malcolm Brogdon. With Malcolm Brogdon being out, I shouldn't say would. He's going to get a boost because Malcolm Brogdon is out. He's at 0.93 points per minute on the season with him off the court and a 23% usage rate. And it's a pretty darn good spot versus Golden State, who ranks 28th versus point guards, 23rd versus shooting guards. So hope this video was helpful, guys. Hope you like the new format. Before we leave, though, I do want to talk about overlaydfs.com. So again, guys, this is overlaydfs.com. I've been talking about them a lot recently because they have been sponsoring the show, but it's a really fun website that I've been playing on personally, as you can see. And this was tonight's slate, or last night's slate, whenever you're watching this video. I ended up finishing third, so I did end up finishing in the money as they pay out the top 10%. Top 10% of players win 9x their money. So this was the $22 double deuce. I got third place, ended up being in the money, so I won $180. I'm getting a little bit closer to this jackpot at 12-0. It's still going. It's at $6,600. So if you happen to go 12-0 in your picks, you can win $6,600 jackpot. That'll go up tomorrow. As you can see, no one has won it yet. But overlaydfs.com, if you don't know what it is, it's pretty much just a pick'em kind of website. There's no salary cap involved, and you don't have to worry about sharks. So it's pretty much as simple as this. If you just take a look on the right of my screen, you just pick, like, they give you certain matchups, and you pick which player you think is going to score more points. So LeBron James versus Anthony Davis, I thought that was pretty easily going to be LeBron, so I ended up picking LeBron. That ended up winning pretty easily. I had Bradley Beal versus Kevin Love. I like Bradley Beal a lot. You guys knew that, so I ended up going with Bradley Beal. Dwight Howard with JaVale McGee being out. I ended up going with Dwight Howard because he's going to get the start and score. You know, we had, I forget how many minutes he played, but I think it was close to 30. But you guys get the idea. You pretty much just pick who you think is going to score the most points, and if you happen to finish in the top 10%, you win prizes. Actually, pretty good prizes as well. I do like the payout structure here, and if you happen to go 12-0, you get that over $6,000 jackpot. That might be close to $7,000 tomorrow. But again, check it out. It's a really fun website. I wouldn't recommend it to you guys if I didn't play it myself. As you can see, I do play it. I did finish third tonight. Had a pretty good night. And they do pay out pretty quick. They paid me out less than 24 hours last time I played. They got some good people over there. Again, you're not dealing with sharks. I don't have a promo code to sign up. Just head over to overlaydfs.com. Also running a slump buster program. If you lose 20 days in a row, they will refund every single dollar that you played. So they're pretty much just daring you guys to lose. Again, check it out. Overlaydfs.com. Really fun website that I like to play on as well. Just to supplement DraftKings as well, because obviously I love DraftKings, but it's also fun to try some new things like overlaydfs.com, which is a very simple website, very casual website to be able to learn and understand how to play. So I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope it was helpful. If you like the new format, let me know. If you don't, I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep doing it like this. So I apologize if you don't, but I don't think it's more simple this way. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Wish you guys the best of luck. I got to get some sleep. Looks like I'm only going to get about 5 to 6 hours, which sucks, but I'll be out the weekend, so I'll sleep in on the weekend.